there, fellow maker. Welcome down to the shop. You got Bill here. You got Nick here, too. How you doing, Nick? Oh, Bill, I'm doing pretty great. Had a lot of fun sculpting this.
Really?
Hey, it's Nick from Modulus Props.
Hey.
We are back. We did our sculpting last week, made some masks. Nick, yours is looking very charming.
Thank you. Likewise.
And today we're gonna make some molds of them. So we're gonna make silicone molds so that we can then cast rigid mask copies out of those molds.
Right. Yeah, we'll do some basic brush-on molds with some brush-on silicone. Shouldn't be anything too complicated. We don't have any crazy undercuts or things to worry about in these sculpts, so should go pretty quick.
It should. Famous last words. What could go wrong?
Exactly.
All right, let's get started.
So the clay we're using for the mold walls, this is a Plastalina clay. So we have it here in my clay oven. We're gonna heat it up so that it is a little bit more pliable and easy to get onto the armature. The Plastalina clay here is at room temperature, it's a lot more pliable than monster clay. So for doing something that we wanna do really quickly, like put mold walls on, we want a nice soft clay, something that's still firm enough where we can bump it with a brush and not have to worry about it moving around too much.
Our clay is nice and pliable. To get it into a nice uniform thickness, I built this thing with a couple of runners on it, and you could use a rolling pin or any other round thing like this heavy chunk of metal I found on the side of the road and flatten your clay. But if this runs on these runners, then it will only flatten down to a certain thickness.
And then we can take that sheet of clay, cut it into strips, and then use that to build a wall to keep the silicone from running all over the place.
Definitely. Making ourselves some clay cookies. It's a good bake. This piece is ready to go. A nice uniform thickness. And then I also have a clear ruler, but it's got a metal edge so that when I'm cutting it, I don't carve it up. So I can cut out some nice strips. Half an inch?
Half an inch, yeah, that's probably plenty. The system we have here.
I know, this is pretty brilliant. It's a lot easier to do this kind of work with the mold or the master lying down because we're going to be pouring silicone over it. And then our little clay snakes, they're not snakes, they're square.
Walls.
Really weird snakes. We can build a retaining wall around these so that the silicone doesn't escape on us.
I probably leave about an inch or so between the edge of the sculpt and the beginning of the wall, just to give me enough room to work with when I cast it. Since we'll be slush casting these, we want to have a lip around the edge of the mold to prevent the resin from escaping the mold. And this is mostly just to catch the first layer or two where we don't put any thickener in, where it's just going to want to run off the sculpt onto the table.
We've done all the prep work, and it's time to get the silicone on our masks here. We have Rebound 25, a really good brush on silicone, really great for this sort of stuff. Mix it 1 to 1, we'll do it by weight. We got a scale. We're just gonna guess, do about 300 grams total. We're gonna pre-mix each side. This has been sitting on a shelf for a while, so I wanna make sure it's nice and homogeneous.
This stuff actually looks pretty good. If I scrape it along the bottom, I don't see the white bits, which is usually indicative of it having settled.
Going for about 150 grams. Boop.
Too much.
Not too much. I'm really good.
And I'm gonna pour in the same amount by weight, so another 148 grams of part B.
Not 1 gram more or less.
It needs to be exact.
There's a little bit of wiggle room.
There is. So we'll get about 20 minutes of working time with this.
Oh!
Oh no!
Oh, went over.
Close enough.
So to be totally sure that this is mixed and that nothing is stuck to the wall, we're gonna scrape it down into another cup and then mix it in this cup. So scrape everything out of that one. And then we're gonna throw it in the degassing chamber for just a minute or two to get some bubbles out. For a brush-on mold, that's not totally necessary, but we have it, so we're gonna use it. These molds will never go in a pressure pot. That's when having a vacuum chamber is really necessary. It is time to brush on our silicone.
With these chip brushes, we can get pretty aggressive in terms of stippling the silicone on the surface and not have to worry too much about disturbing any detail that we have on this monster clay because it's pretty firm at room temperature.
Yeah.
So I usually like to go over and stipple this first coat on very thin.
Also, if you're worried that your stippling might affect the surface quality, you could chill your clay so it's more rigid.
Right.
Yeah. We're also trying really hard to make sure we don't get any air bubbles trapped in any part of our sculpt. I'm actually leaving some silicone in the eye to kind of be a hopper to feed from, to get the rest of the surfaces covered in there.
We're not actually using a release on this sculpt before we put the silicone on. The monster clay, being a wax-based clay, will actually release this Rebound 25 really easily, so we don't need to worry about it. At this end of the sculpt, I've got these teeth here, and there is a little bit of an undercut underneath these teeth that's going to kind of trap the silicone a little bit. If we keep the mold thin enough, it should give us enough room to work those teeth free. One way we could deal with longer teeth, like fangs, if I had very long fangs on here, is we could separate those from the sculpt and do a separate mold of just the teeth and then reattach them later.
We got our masks all covered with the first layer. This is like the detail layer. You can see it's running off the sides. That's fine, that's gonna happen. We mixed up more than we needed to, and we've got some time to kill. It's gonna be like an hour before we can put the next layer on.
Right.
So we're gonna use this extra silicone to make mold keys. I have more of our plasticine clay, and I'm just gonna press forms or holes in it with the head of this bolt. You can do all kinds of stuff. For your mold keys, I've got some dice here. Whatever you've got around that could make a nice shape in clay is good for making mold keys. So we'll make a bunch of these in the clay and then pour our extra silicone into it.
It's been about an hour. We've got the first layer of silicone on here is pretty much set. If I touch the little drippy down piece here, I can see that it's tacky, but it's not squishy. So that means we're ready to brush on our second coat of silicone.
This is also not thickened. Sometimes you might want to thicken this with some Thivex, but we don't want to do that. We want to make sure we get all the detail. So we're probably gonna do, what do you think, like 3 or 4 layers? Probably 4, maybe?
I think 4 layers would probably be good. I usually do 2 unthickened layers and then 2 thickened layers.
That sounds good. We made sure this is cured enough that it's not gonna pull off while we're dabbing it.
You'll notice we're using the same color as we did for the first layer. We did not put any tint in this.
You could.
You could. Sometimes it helps you to see where you've applied silicone and where you have not yet applied silicone. With the layers being as thin as they are, it's pretty easy to keep track of those layers.
Smooth on a Silpig, silicone pigment.
Okay, that's the second layer. We'll give it about an hour and then on to the next layer.
Another hour has passed. It is no longer sticky. Time to brush on the next layer, but this one will be different.
Yeah, this time we're going to add a thickening agent to the silicone. It is this Thivex, also made by Smooth On. It'll make it a little bit more like a cake batter consistency.
That means we can start filling in all the indents and kind of making this whole thing featureless. Or we'll mix the 2 halves together and then we'll mix in the Thivex, and there's no point in trying to degas it. We're not gonna throw it in the vacuum chamber. We'll just mix it up and slather it on like peanut butter. Mm-hmm. We're mixing up quite a lot more for these layers. They're gonna be a lot thicker because we can lay it on really thick. It won't run off the sides. So we're just emptying what we have left in here. We'll probably need a little bit more. So we have 2 of these trial size kits to do 2 masks. But I think normally if you were just doing 1 of these masks, 1 trial size kit of the silicone would probably be enough. We ended up diving into our second trial kit, but we think we can get away with adding only 1 thickened layer, but we'll put it on and see how it turns out.
Oh no, look what I did. So the ratio I usually use for the Thivex is 4 drops per mixed ounce of silicone. So I've got 20 ounces of silicone here. I'm gonna add about 80 drops of Thivex to that. 1, 2, 3.
So tempting to mess you up.
Please don't. I'm waiting for somebody to try to fuck me.
I was thinking about it. We have decided to add some pigment to the next layer for fun. This is silicone pigment, blood colored. So I'm gonna grab a little bit out of there and mix it in.
The Thivex is mixed in there. You can see it's a lot less runny now than without the Thivex, so it's pretty much ready to go.
Yeah, this is like a really nice creamy peanut butter. Hashtag Team Creamy Peanut Butter.
Hashtag crunchy peanut butter.
I only like smooth peanut butter.
Yeah.
Get out.
So I'm using the same kind of technique to apply this. I'm stippling it in order to not get any air bubbles trapped between the layers here. My teeth down on this end, I just need to be careful to get the silicone underneath those so we don't have any lock points when we put the mother mold shell on top of this. So our masks have enough features, pointy features on them that we don't think we're gonna need registration keys. We think that the geometry of the sculpts here are enough to get this to seat into the mother mold without any problem.
Also, our keys haven't cured all the way yet.
Yeah, they're not usable.
Let's be honest to the folks at home. Hey, hello there. While we are working on that, I'd like to take a moment to thank our wonderful patrons. It's because of your support that we're able to do really cool projects like this, bring in wonderful guests like Nick, and continue to make super fantastic prop and costume making tutorial videos for the entire community. If you'd like to jump in and get yourself access to weekly behind the scenes vlogs, extra credit videos for all of our builds, and early release for all of our builds, and you can head on over to patreon.com/punishprops today and consider tossing us $1. Thanks so much for the support, and let's get back to the build. We're eventually going to have a 1-part jacket mold on top of this, so we're filling in a lot of these features on here so that they don't get caught in the jacket mold. This will make a lot more sense once we've made the jacket mold. So that was the 3rd layer, and that looks like more than enough. I think we're good to go.
I think we're good. We probably have at least 3/8 of an inch to ½ inch thick.
Yeah, nice and thick. Now we just let this cure for another hour or so, and then we work on making our jacket mold.
We noticed an issue with our keys here. So we had taken a bolt and pressed the bolt head into this monster clay and then poured some silicone over that. And where the silicone touched only the monster clay, that has cured just fine, but where the silicone was in the little cavities made by the bolt head, it's really sticky, which means that this has had a cure inhibition problem caused by something on the surface of that bolt head. We probably could have just cleaned the surface of that bolt head with acetone or some sort of cleaner to prevent that, but we didn't in this case, so now we have some keys that are sticky that we're not going to end up using. This is something you have to be careful about with platinum silicone, and the Rebound 25 we're using is platinum, and there are a bunch of things that can cause cure inhibition with this type of silicone.
It has been another hour or so later. The silicone has firmed up enough that we think we can put our freeform air on there. Of course, if we had waited overnight, that would have been fine if it was totally cured. The freeform air is gonna make a rigid jacket around it. This stuff's awesome. It's an epoxy dough, and as the name would suggest, it's quite light. We're just gonna use all of this, I think.
I think, yeah, if we figure one of these containers is probably enough to give us a good thickness of shell for each of these masks. So 2 of these together, I think should be pretty close.
All right, I will cut this in half. So there we go. There's 1/2 and the other half. This should be fine. So let's get to mixing. So we're just trying to mix these together so that it is all one color.
About like the 60 minutes.
Cool. So we have an hour to work with this, which is fantastic. We won't need all that time. Definitely a good idea to wear gloves when you're working with this.
So easy and so light. These are great for doing slush cast molds.
All right, mine is good to go. So I'm gonna get to mashing it on my face. Not my face, this face. And it's not gonna wanna like stay put. It is kind of tacky, but it's not gonna bond to the silicone. We are just now realizing that we didn't spray any mold release on the silicone. Now, the freeform air won't bond to the silicone, like I said, but it would release a lot easier if we had sprayed some mold release down.
Also, I think we have way more than we need.
Yeah. Nick had some extra material. So I'm gonna make a flat spot on the bottom so that when I'm slush casting this, if I need to set the mold down, it'll have a nice flat spot to rest on. That's what I'm doing.
I'm gonna do the same.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Got a flat piece of wood and a piece of parchment paper, and I'm just gonna flatten that. And then this should come right off, kind of. It actually wants to stick to the MDF less than the parchment paper.
As I'm slush casting this, I don't want it to be sharp and have pointy bits that are poking me, so I can smooth everything out here with a little bit of water.
Boop, 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 boop. Our jacket molds have been applied. They're still doughy. We're gonna let them cure overnight. So we're gonna go have some tacos. That was a lot of tacos.
Those were delicious tacos.
Hey, our molds are done. Yay! The freeform air's totally cured.
Yep, I think we're ready to demold. You may have an easier time on yours because you've got a stone armature to work against. My head is a little bit softer, so I need to be careful about where I jam.
You might mash
screwdrivers
up
in
your
here.
ed head.
You need to be, a little on the careful side.
Were you thinking about trying to do like this, like in between there?
Yeah, that's what I
I
was gonna do.
see. So I'm just gonna try and get the jacket mold off. You do have to be careful in the edge where it's thin there. It actually snapped a little bit. Also, this thing isn't gonna come off that way. It's gonna have to go that way, but you want to release it from the silicone. This is where having put a little mold release on that silicone would have helped a bit. Wiggle a little bit. So I'm just gonna go around the perimeter and do that. If you're super quiet, you can hear it releasing. Ready? There it goes.
You want some more hands there?
I got this.
Hey!
Ta-da! That little lip there was giving me a little trouble, but I'll sand that off. Oh, nice. Ta-da!
Cool.
That's great. And the clay is completely unscathed, it looks like. Well, maybe a little bit came off in the mold.
So this usually, you could see this peels really easily right off the clay there.
Nice.
Cool. We're peeling off the little bits of epoxy from the shell that are stuck to the clay, and we can reuse this clay for more projects, more mold walls.
I'm gonna trim all this extra stuff off. We'll have a nice clean edge right there. So I'll go all the way around and do some tidying work. The edge of my jacket mold here is a little jagged, so I'm just gonna use my rotary tool to clean it up. Now this got all of the clay out when I pulled it off, but I want to go over and clean it a little bit anywhere I see like bits of clay maybe. This is 99% rubbing alcohol or isopropyl alcohol, and it will evaporate. It won't leave any moisture in the mold, which would be very bad. So we use some alcohol and just clean up anywhere that I see clay or anything else on there. And then we'll be ready to cast. It is finally casting time!
Yay!
Our molds are ready to go. You got some clips on yours to make sure that the ends don't fold in. So I grabbed some clamps myself. I can just keep them from moving. We have a couple of different techniques we're gonna use. We'll be slush casting all of these, but for the finishes, I'm gonna use some metal powders on mine. I have some bronze here and I have some aluminum. And I'm gonna try and make aluminum on just the parts that are mechanical looking. Then the bronze I'm gonna put on just the parts that are the hammered metal texture. How about you, Nick?
Well, since I have something that's being a little bit more like bone, I'm gonna start with a bone color. So we'll
you go.
take some white resin, mix in a little bit of yellow pigment, and then probably just give it a couple washes, brown washes.
Fantastic. All right, let's get started. I only want this aluminum powder on a couple of spots, and you can see I spilled a bit. It's gonna happen. I've got some alcohol in here and a little cotton swab, and I can use that to pick up all that aluminum powder. Now that my aluminum's all cleaned up, I'm gonna add bronze powder, and this is going on everything. And I'll sort of bump it around to coat all the inside surfaces, and it's okay if it goes in there because the aluminum is already there. I am ready to slush cast mine, so I've got my resin ready to go. This is Smooth Cast 300. I tinted it with black. I've got 1 ounce of side B, and then I'll add that. But first I want to add a little bit more of this bronze powder to the resin. Mix that in. Ready to pour my side A in, mix it, and get to slush casting. I'm gonna gently pour this in there so I don't disturb any of my powder. Mine's a little low in the middle. That's fine though. So for the second layer on my mask, this is Smooth Cast Onyx. You could just keep using 300, but Onyx kicks a bit faster and kind of gels a bit faster. So I'm going to use that instead, just to save my arms on the rotocasting. This also kicks really hot and really fast, so you got to be ready to go. Now I could have just slush cast this Onyx straight in there, but the 300 is better at capturing all the detail. So I wanted to make sure I didn't get any bubbles. So I did the print coat in 300, and then this is going to bulk up the rest of it. Nerp, 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 nerp. Oh boy, that's kicking.
I mixed a tiny bit of yellow with a tiny bit of brown, and it's a little bit more closer to a bone color. If we had smooth cast 305, that resin itself has kind of an off-white bone color. That would be another way to get that bone effect. One thing I'll do sometimes is keep it in the mixing cup for a while. With this little amount of resin, it takes a while to start kicking, so I'll kind of let that process, and then I have less time to spend slushing this in the mold. Just making sure that I don't have any air bubbles trapped at the bottoms of these teeth where it comes to a point. Yeah.
Oh man, that's so cool. I love it. It is time to demold. Nice and cured, and hopefully everything pops out easily. It is slightly attached down there. Oh, nope, not anymore. Yes. See, those are the different colored powders there, and I did a pretty good job of not getting it where I don't want it. So my mold worked out okay. Clearly some resin spilled out here. I might put like a piece of masking tape or duct tape there next time I slush cast it a little bit, but otherwise everything seemed to turn out really well. Everything seems to be a fairly uniform thickness, nice and rigid. I can get ready to start cleaning up the edges. That fits me perfectly. How about that?
You look so angry.
I'm going to do something Nick likes to do with his cold cast masks, and I'm going to paint it all first before buffing the metal powder. So I just have a flat black acrylic paint in here. It's very thinned out, and I'm just going to paint every surface black. I'm going to cover it. It's time for the really cool part. So the paint is dry on here. I have some really fine steel wool, and I can just start to buff it, and it will bring on this part, the bronze will start to come out, which is really cool. But the low spots will stay that nice flat black. I'm being careful to not scrub all the way through that finish. And what's cool about this is I can leave some spots darker if I want them to look like they're kind of in shadow. I don't have to scrub all of it off. Now this was all bronze here, and that's looking really cool. But this was done with that aluminum, so it should look quite a bit different. Look at how bright that is. What? And I can decide how much of that black I want to take off too. This is so cool.
Here's a mask I have cast in this bone kind of color, kind of an off-white. And the next thing I want to do is dirty this thing up. Put a couple layers of weathering over it. The paint I'm going to use is this Liquitex Heavy Body, or as we like to call it, SKS paint. And just a cheap brush, so I'll just give it a pretty good coat here. Not give it much of a chance to dry, and then wipe most of that off. The last thing I want to do on this mask here is put a little bit of a gloss coat over the teeth. So I have this Model Master Gloss Clear Lacquer, and I'm just going to brush that right on.
Up next, we're going to do some more cold casting with copper powder, but I have two different colors of copper. This really dark one that Nick's going to try, and then this lighter one that I'm going to put in my mold. I've added some duct tape instead of my clamps. I've just taped it in. The silicone doesn't stick to the tape, but that's okay. It'll stick down and hold it. And then I added this little dam here to keep the resin from sneaking out that way. So this time I'm gonna go with a copper powder. Here's Nick's with the darker, redder copper, and here's mine with the brighter, more orangey copper. You can see a very distinct difference in the castings. We polished both of them up with a little bit of steel wool, and now we want to make them super rusty. So we've got this oxidizing solution from Sculpt Nouveau, and we're gonna go blast them with this and get it all rusty. Here's our copper mask. They've been sitting out in the sun rusting for about an hour. Ideally, you would leave it actually in the shade for about 12 hours, but we didn't have that kind of time. So we got them as rusty as we could in as short a time as possible, and then we're going to buff them again to bring back some of the metallic shine on the highlights. We've finished! Look at all the masks that we made!
These turned out so cool.
This was a ton of fun and a lot of things to crank out in just a couple of days. If you missed it, we did a sculpting video showing how we did these guys right here. You can go check that out. If you want to learn more about what Nick is up to, and you do want to know what he's up to because it's awesome and he's got a lot of big plans.
Well, people can find me at modulusprops.com and also on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Modulus Props.
We've got links for all of those places down below. Please go check them out. You owe it to yourself to follow what Nick's been working on. Nick, thank you for sharing your expertise and hanging out the last few days.
This has been so much fun.
Super, super fun. I recommend if you've got a pal out there, you go have these on a tub of monster clay. You could start making stuff like this.
Yeah, it's so easy to get started.
If you have any questions about this build, please let us know down in the comments. We'll do our best to get back to you. And of course, thank you very much to our patrons over at patreon.com/punishprops for helping provide the financial support that keeps this shop running. Thank you so much. If you want to join, you can head on over there, throw us a buck, and gain access to exclusive videos, vlogs, behind-the-scenes content, and early releases on all of our videos. If you'd like to follow along to a build similar to this, all the tools and materials are linked down below. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next build. Now, I'm going to guess that Nick's going to want this clay back.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to get that clay back.
All right.
So,
We're gonna cast this guy. Am I right? This guy.
That's a little creepy. You can see it's a lot less runny now than without the Thibex, so it's pretty much ready to go on to the Dang. You did that again.
If you're super quiet, you can hear it releasing. Ready? That's not the sound I meant.
The sound of it breaking.